Welcome to a wonderful study of the book of Genesis, where we will be rediscovering the story of creation. This is just the first part of the series. It is a two-part series, and in this study, I will be actually exploring the creative power of God and the six-day creation. And the main emphasis will be on the origins of the universe based on the content of Genesis and other supporting scriptures. I will be doing the presentation, and welcome to this wonderful exposition. So, for my introduction, I want you to know this is actually a forensic exploration of biblical creation or creation according to the Bible, according to Genesis and other scriptures. So there are other extra Genesis text or books such as Isaiah, Jeremiah, and John that contributes to the story of Genesis according to the Bible. And this study will also re-examine or review the first day of creation, which is Genesis 1 verse 3, popularly believed to be the first day of creation when God said, "Let there be light." We were going to look at it once again to find out if that was the first thing God created. And I will also re-explore Genesis 1 verse 1 to look at the primordial elements such as darkness, water, and air or wind, which is translated spirit from Genesis chapter 1 verse 2. And all these things are founded or originated from Genesis 1 verse 1. The main aim is to uncover a nuanced perspective on the origins of the universe in a critical way, forensically, about the origins of the earth and life as it is today. Now, as we begin, we need to understand that according to the present notion, which is the modern perception of the universe, the popular idea is that everything that we see came out of nothing. However, a critical analysis of that statement speaks otherwise, telling us that nothing is actually something. Hence, the universe did not truly come out of nothing. And there are other contemporary cosmology and philosophical reasoning, and that is the issue of nothingness. The current popular idea of the origin of the universe is the Big Bang, and the Big Bang suggests that the current universe was blown out of nothing, and that time, space, and matter all came out of the existing void. So, actually, this is just a theory. There isn't any substantive evidence to prove otherwise, but that is what is held by the current view. The notion that creation transited from non-being to being. Meaning it was nothing and became something without the help of anything. Nothing helped creation to come into being, including all the laws of nature and the laws of physics which came together. And the current addition is that reality can be explained without any reference to an external force, and that the universe or the cosmos is the self-caused, or its around became by itself. It doesn't need an agency. Right, so to this end, we're going to look at the the multiplicity of the various theories that tries to elucidate the origins of the universe. There are several theories about origins, Some of them are scientific, whereas others are philosophical. There are also religious perspective to it, and most of them I think you can read them yourself. I'm not going to go so deep into it. Now, the foremost and the main theory that is widely accepted is the Big Bang, and it actually proposes that the universe began about 13.8 billion years ago from a single point, what is called singularity, a point of infinite density and temperature, where all the known laws of physics actually are in singularity, and an expansion occurred ever since, and the universe uh, has been expanding since then. Now, that is what it is. It remains a theory, nothing more, nothing less. A theory means there are some amount of experimentation that can be used as evidence to support the position, but there are no observable proofs. In other words, we never saw it happen, except that we have theories, and it is just like a theory. A theory is different from an eyewitness account. So currently, it is what it is. It is what is believed on until otherwise proven to be wrong. Now, there are other theories that is also parallel to the Big Bang theory. We have the steady state theory, which suggests also actually it opposes the Big Bang, saying the universe has no beginning, there is no end. Matter is continuously created or maintained, and to maintain a constant density as the universe expands. That was it, and there was some amount of evidence to support it. That is the cosmic microwave background radiation uh, that gives credence to this theory. And again, it remains a theory. There is also this other popular theory, and that is the oscillating or cyclic universe theory. This theory is more or less like a Hindu mythology. You know, most of these cosmologists, the 20th century cosmologists, most of them were practicing Hindu, some were Jewish, and some were Christians. The Big Bang theory was actually proposed by a Catholic priest, so it is more or less like it's an ideal theory from a Christian perspective or Christian origin. But in the cyclic universe, which suggests the universe undergoes continuous and endless cycles of expansion and contraction, it's like it is being born. It's like a cycle of life and death. It dies. The universe dies and is reborn, and it dies and reborns, and it's like it goes on and on and on. And that is an idea held by the Hindu religion with regards to creation. So it is also just a theory. Moreover, we also have the inflation theory, where it talks about the fact that the universe experiences a brief period of extreme rapid expansion called inflation, and then actually just after it was just after the Big Bang. In other words, this is a theory meant to support the Big Bang. So it tries to explain that broad and large scale uniformity seen across the universe. There is also the multiverse theory, which is very popular nowadays, which suggests that we don't just have one universe, there are many universes, and each has its own laws. So, and the fact that one can may travel from one universe to another through special tunnels called wormholes. Um, so it is a very popular theory nowadays, and it has its origin in quantum science, which suggests that an alternative as exists somewhere in one of those multiverses. And this idea is highly connected to the string theory and quantum fluctuations. It is actually a wonderful theory, and it is just like that. It remains a theory; it's never proven, and no observable experience, at least in the public domain. Maybe there is something that we may call an evidence also. We also have the quantum fluctuation theory, or the vacuum fluctuation theory, where the laws of quantum mechanics allow spontaneous creation of matter and energy. Then we have the string theory and the brain cosmology, very interesting. It suggests the universe exists as a brain within a higher dimensional plane, and collisions of this brain sparks or could have sparked the Big Bang. So some of these ideas like the quantum fluctuation, multiverse, and the string theory, inflation theory do not contradict the Big Bang. They are meant to complement it. On the other side, we also have the religious and the philosophical theories, and we have Christianism, that is a theistic origin, which suggests that creation occurred in 6 days, and creation was brought into being by an agent, a divine being. In Christianity, it is called God. In Judaism, it's called Yod-Heh-Vah. In Islam, it's called another being. In Hindu cosmology, which is akin to the cyclic inflation theory, which suggests that the universe undergoes an infinite cycles of birth, existence, and dissolution, and they have a god, a deity that governs it. And then we go into the Buddhist cosmology, which posits or creates the idea that the universe has no absolute beginning. It is eternal and cyclic and it exists like an endless cycles of formation and destruction. Then other mythology, when you go far back in the ancient times, like the Greeks mythology, the Egyptian mythology, the Norse mythology, they all speak about the existence of the universe from various perspectives and cultural reasoning. Now, there are other alternative or speculative theories. Now, a theory is also a speculation in context. It's kind of a speculation that can be supported with one or two evidence. So, unlike a hypothesis, which is an argument, a theory is actually more or less a formative or a formal speculation that can be supported. It's still a speculation. So, none of these things is actually provable, and so most especially the scientific theory. But then, this presentation, you're going to look at it from the Christian, biblical, the Judeo-Christian um, position, which is not a theory, which is actually an emphasis, something that is observable. So let's look at the other alternative theory. We have the simulation hypothesis, and is gaining ground today. It suggested that a higher intelligence created this universe, and this universe is actually a simulation. It is digitized. Others believe in what they call the plasma cosmology, and tries to explain the fact that the entire universe, it did not come by Big Bang, but by electrical charges and electromagnetic forces. We also have the anthropic principle, which proposes the universe appears the way it is because circumstances or conditions allows it to exist in that manner. Now, all these theories challenges the primary biblical view of creation to the extent that there are Christians who even doubt it. But in this study or presentation, I've made it in such a way that I don't want to mix the two ideas together, because as it stands now, there are two main concepts of the origins of the universe. There are two universes that we all face with. Actually, there are multiverses. The multiverse may be real because there are different religions and different cultures with their different notions of the universe. So the universe presented by the scientific community has several other universes at the bottom. And the universes in religion, there are also several of them. The universes in under philosophy, there are several universes. The universe presented by the Buddhist and the Hindus and other religions, they are totally different from the universe seen under in a scientific model, and they all hold on to it. So they all live in their own unique universe. Hence, the existence of the multiverse cannot be disproved, cannot be undermined also. But in this presentation, I'll be laying emphasis on the biblical universe. And as I've stated it here, there are two grand universes we are now faced with. We are not going to consider the other factors. We're going to look at the scientific universe because that is the main universe we are always bombarded with on a daily basis. And that is a universe that challenges the Christian view. That is what makes many people to leave the faith, but you don't have to leave the faith because of some pictures or videos. So in this study, I want you to, before I go on, I want you to understand that there are two forms of universes. There are two universes here. We have the biblical universe and the modern scientific universe. And both of them are talking about the same reality from a different perspective. And as they study and they look at the world in which we live. So one key thing about the biblical universe is that it is readily observable. You can see it. You don't need any powerful or expensive instrumentation to see it. We see the earth, we see the sky, we see the sea, the sun, the moon. That is what they are. That is how we perceive it. We don't have to be on the moon to look at it, look back on the earth to perceive it. And this universe also lays emphasis on purpose. It gives meaning to life. It talks about order from chaos. It also looks at divine activity, and it understands creation from the perspective of human observation, and it looks at our special place in creation. The biblical cosmology, it tries to answer a lot of questions, but I've selected this few, like who created the universe, why was it created, what is humanity's place in it, and the main question people normally ask: why was the universe created? Why do they exist? Why are they where they are? So the biblical universe, according to the Bible, explains it as it is. Then we go to the scientific model of the universe, which is totally different in architectural outlook, where it speaks about the sun being the center of our solar system, encircled elliptically by other planets, of which our Earth, our habitat, is one of it. And it is just one of the billions of many other worlds that exist in our Milky Way galaxy. And the sun, which is a star, is part of billions and billions of other stars that make up the Milky Way. And the Milky Way itself is part of billions of other galaxies that exist in the void of space. The scientific universe is fascinating because it presents pictures, videos, and a lot of scientific exploration and expedition that makes it highly exciting. However, the modern scientific universe is actually dependent on instrumentation. It's a form of like instrumental cosmology. It's not something you can easily observe. To fully observe the modern scientific universe, you need to go through scientific investigation and technology. It is dependent on that. It depends also heavily on telescopes, satellites, probes, advanced mathematics, complex maths, complex laws of physics, complex instrumentations, complex measurements, complex physical laws, things that not everybody can cope with. They take data and they process it to let us know how the universe, or the universe in which we live in, is. Now that is not to say the information they're presenting is wrong. It's very accurate because that is what the instrument they are using is telling them. So these are honest people using a wonderful instrument to tell us what our place in the universe is. Today we know there are galaxies, there are black holes, dark matter, quantum particles, cosmic structures that are beyond human imaginary perception. It has actually helped us to understand the Bible view of the visible and the invisible, something Christianity hasn't been able to explain so much well, most especially with the so-called spiritual realm. A statement which doesn't exist in the Bible. Rather, the Bible talks about the invisible. So the modern scientific universe is tries to understand how the universe functions, how cosmic structures form, and the processes that governs nature. So that is highly fascinating. It has led to the creation of a lot of fields of learning, a lot of careers, inventions, all the equipments and the technology we are using today, where most of them were born out of modern cosmology. So it is a wonderful view. These are honest people doing honest job, honest instrumentation. There is no prejudice there. Nobody is trying to hide something. Remember, they are using what we call laws of physics, theories, and conjectures. So if they disagree with you, you don't have to get angry. It's the reason why I said we are looking at two distinct universes. There are no clashes. We are going to treat each separately from the other. I'm not going to talk much about the modern scientific universe because we know a lot about it. It's all over the internet. But then the biblical universe is not well explored. There are little known facts about it, and the aim is to unveil it. So that is the goal. Then, to that end, we need to understand that even though these two universes are factual in many ways, there are key differences that we need to look at. Like we, from my perspective and from a biblical perspective, what God created was physical. The universe created by God wasn't spiritual. It wasn't something hidden. We may call it supernatural, but it's still natural. It's still physical, visible. So if it is visible with modern scientific instrumentation, we should be able to measure it. So biblical cosmology views the universe through direct observation and divine revelation. Yeah, but I'm gonna lay emphasis on this and this, and we're gonna see when we talk about revelation, it's not that kind of revelation that we'll be looking at, something that you can see and observe. Then, in terms of scientific cosmology, we look at the universe viewed through massive instrumentation, massive experimentation, massive mathematical analysis. And it's so beautiful, and I love it because it proves a whole lot of stuff, something I'll be doing later to explain that these things need some form of intelligence for it to come into being. I'll be doing a wonderful study. I've done a book on it, which is yet to be published. So those are the key distinctions. But that is not to say biblical cosmology that cannot be viewed through instrumentation also. It can be viewed through instrumentation. It can be viewed through experimentation. It can be viewed through mathematical analysis because God said, test me. So God does not shy away from we testing him. So we can subject his word to experimentation using powerful instrumentation and powerful mathematical analysis. The difference between the two is about attention and investment. Scientific cosmology spends billions and billions of dollars through instrumentation, experimentation, and observation, whereas biblical cosmology does not do that. They depend mostly on observation and divine revelation. And people want evidence, and the Bible does not shy away, like John said, what our eyes have seen, our hands have handled, our eyes have looked upon, what we have tasted, that's what we testify. So we need to do what John said, we need to experiment, we need to taste. But then they both have something in common, in as much as there are some key differences. They both share the fact that the universe it has some kind of a starting point. All right, they both have a perspective that describe the same universe. They're describing the same thing. It's not like they're looking at two realms, right? They're looking at the same thing, but then they look at it from different viewpoints and from different purposes. For now, this is how they look at it. But after the presentation, you'll see they're gonna look at it also in another way. So another distinct difference between the current modern cosmology and biblical cosmology is time factor, and it's very important. Whereas science sees creation as a slow, natural cycles and processes occurring over billions of years, the Bible looks at it as a rapid divine act completed within a short time, that is 6 days. And we're going to see that that is impossible. But then there are other further similarities that I did not touch on, I'm going to do it now, and that is the fact that they both have a beginning. In science, there's a big bang. In the Bible, too, there is a beginning. In both science and Bible, they all talk about a beginning. One began with an intelligent being behind it. One, it began spontaneously. So time itself had a starting point. Time has a beginning, and the Bible too talks about time having a beginning. It is not surprising because the Big Bang was proposed by a Christian. So, in terms of timing or the timeline, the distinction will be in the fact that the scientific universe measures time in billions, whereas the biblical creation measures time in days, and that's 6 days. And that does not contradict anything because we understand one of the greatest discovery of the first century is that time is relative. So we can't measure time across space the same way we will expect it to be. Time differ. In one universe, time occurs in days. In another universe, time occurs in billions of years. It is still acceptable. So one is just a natural unfolding process. One is immediate. But this is where I try not to mix things up because how do we define natural? Remember the Bible says God created the sun. That sun that he created, is that the same sun that we see? If it's the same sun that we see in the sky, then what he created was natural. It wasn't some spiritual thing that he did. Okay, so let's move away from here and then let's look at the universe that existed before creation. Now that may sound very outlandish because the Big Bang does not suggest a universe existed before creation. However, according to the Bible, a universe existed before creation. And if that is the case, if God created all things and all the things he has created is observable, and he truly did everything, and all the history in the Bible are true, then with the proper instrumentation, with the proper experimentation, with the proper mathematical analysis, we should be able to prove that a universe existed before our universe. It is not to re-echo other philosophical or religious theories. No, there are other theories that believe that this universe goes through a cycle of birth and rebirth, like birth, death, and rebirth. No, that's not what we're talking about. But then there's a plain evidence in scripture that suggests our universe is not the initial absolute universe. I didn't say the earth, I said our universe. So I may not even have to call it universe, I may have to call it something else. And we find it in John 17, verse 5, in the prayers of Christ. He said, now, Father, glorify me in your presence with the glory that I had with you before. Now, this is where the key is. The key word is before. So, before insert or displace us into a different timeline. Before means whatever existed before our timeline or before this universe. So he goes on to say, before the world was. There's no word for universe in the Bible. The word universe can also be replaced with the word world. So this is highly very key. The statement here points in one direction that before creation, there was nothing like emptiness or void or nothingness. So the idea that the universe came out of nothing is being dismissed here. It is the verse is telling us that before the world came into being, he existed. There was a being that was in existence, and he, Jesus, was one with that being. And it reaffirms John's chapter 1, verse 1 2, which states that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And he said he was in the beginning with God. Wonderful. Why not be beautiful? Me telling us there were two beings that existed in the beginning, and the two were actually one entity. Well, we are not looking at this subject. I already explored it in another presentation on the theophany of God. So, because he stated that he should glorify him with the glory that he had before creation, our emphasis will have to look at the glory. How was the pre-creation universe like? How did it look like? Was it a dark realm, a dark place, like we always make to imagine that before the Big Bang, the whole universe was black and like night, no light, no matter, nothing, and then all of a sudden, everything exploded. So here, Christ is challenging the modern view. Actually, he's not challenging; he's pointing us in a direction that yes, we know enough, but then there is more before the Big Bang. Even if it is possible, if it did happen, or before whatever we know existed, before the first atom mineral realm existed, there was a being that existed, and they existed in glory, not in emptiness. So here we're looking at a pre-creation realm, which is a realm of light, fiery energy, and a realm of smoky power, as we will see later on. So we're not looking at a chaotic world. It's looking at a non-chaotic realm filled with glory, power, energy, and only one entity existed, no other entity existed, and no other Shadim had emerged in that universe. So let's look at other extra Genesis accounts. We know Genesis 1 and Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 2 carries the history of creation. Whenever you want to know the story of creation, we go to Genesis. But then there are other verses that suppose how the world was created. It contributes to creation. I would say about 60% of the story of creation is concentrated in Genesis, but then the other 40% they are found scattered throughout the rest of the books of the Bible. So Jeremiah also speaks about how God created the world. He said by his power and by his stretched arm, meaning God was not sitting down and just talking the world into being. No, he stretched out his arm, just as Christ stretched out his arm on the cross, and he, by his power, brought the world into being. Again, Jeremiah states that God created the world by his great power and by his stretched arm. This is another verse to support it. And again, he goes on to speak about his stretched arm. Yeah, and again, we see again talking about how God created the world by his outstretched arm. That is something we can imagine. God stretched out his arm and he points it towards the void, and then he causes things to come into being by his power. So we might imagine like he's sitting down and just talking and talking and talking. No, that's not what happened according to scripture. We are not sure whether he stood up or not, or he sat down, but he stretched forth his hand and he pointed in a particular direction, and things starts happening. Good. So over here, how did God create the world? We know he did it by his word. And John 1 verse 1 points it out that all things were made by the word. That's the Logos. We later like to know the word is a being that became flesh, that became human, called Jesus. And then he also, another process how God created the universe, how the universe was created, was not just really by the word, by also his glory, the heaviness, the mass, the thing that gives matter its form and shape and everything. In Genesis 7, in John 17:5, Christ speaks about the glory that he had before creation came into being. That tells us our universe did not come out of nothing, as we claim. It came out of the glory realm. There was a glory that existed. We're gonna see what glory is. So Habakkuk 3 verse 3 to 4 speaks about the glory covering the heavens and talking about light, energy, and power. Then we also see from the verse we read that creation came by the power and energy of God. In Jeremiah, you've seen it there, that it was the power of God that produced creation. Hebrews 1:3 also speaks about creation coming to being by the word of his power. Colossians also speaks the same thing about how all things were created by him and through him and for him, talking about Jesus Christ. So theologically, there are implications there we need to know, even though we are always meant to believe everything came out of nothing. Not everyone believes that. Even not all scientists believe that. There are those who believe otherwise. And because not all of them are irreligious. Some are Hindu, some are Jews, and etc. But then the evidence is very clear. The one who created the world said, no, we did not come out of nothing. We came out of something. So prior to creation, something existed called Logos. That's the divine blueprint and outlines the wisdom, the capable, the intelligence behind creation. That's the intelligent force. Then we talk about the thing that gives weight, mass, energy to all things. That's the glory. And yet there's a spirit, a force field that causes all things to animate or to be conscious. Then we have the power, okay, as we discovered in the 20th century, energy can be converted into matter and vice versa. So all things were created by God, by the power. That means everything is energy. So the universe is actually energy. Like I put it here, a child of divine glory. It wasn't an accident, a random event, a void-born entity. This is a manifestation of the wisdom, the intelligence, the power, the glory, the energy of God. Now let's see how the glory of God is like. We have our own imagination of the glory of God. We watch it in movies, we read it in books. When we talk about the glory, we always imagine beautiful light, a dangling of cloud. But what is it? So the word is kavod in Hebrew. It means heaviness, weight. I don't know if you have ever experienced supernatural encounters. Spirit beings carry heaviness. They are heavy, weight. It's like carrying weight. I don't know if you're gym, if you're in a gym, see the weight you carry, that's how it feels. The power of God sometimes feels heavy. You can feel there's nothing there, but you can just feel something is heavy. Same thing was felt by those who were bearing the ark. Whenever the glory comes to dwell over the ark becomes heavy. And Uzziah died trying to hold it. So the key word here is heaviness. That is mass. This is what gives mass to matter. For something to be a thing, it needs to have weight. This weight comes from the glory. When we talk about glory, don't imagine honor, don't imagine beautiful like glory life. I'm talking about a force field, something that gives weight or mass to everything. So talking about tangibility, for you to touch something, you feel it. Why are you able to feel it? Because that thing, that matter carries mass, which is God from the glory of God. If you look at the Greek Septuagint, the word is doxa, which is the same as kavod. They are not two distinct words. They are still the same in two languages, and it speaks about the same thing, talking about something visible, and by extension, we're looking at what? Mass of energy. This is energy that carries mass. So this is something that has tangibility to it. In the Old Testament, the glory of God manifested in different ways, and one is very common is the glory cloud. The cloud of smoke, cloud and smoke are almost alike, and you see it in Exodus 16 verse 10. When the glory of God appeared in a cloud, they saw it like the sun. It appears like the sun. It was as if they've seen another sun in the sky, very bright. And then here, when the tabernacle was set up, a cloud covered it, and there was fire there, and Moses couldn't go inside. So very fiery. And in essence, what they saw in the ancient time was that the glory appeared like a dense, heavy mass energy field, very cloud-like, heavy, and it is something you cannot penetrate. It looks like a smoke, but you can't go to it. It looks smoky and solid at the same time. It's not just solid; it's a force field, like a magnetic force of repulsion. So that is how it is in those days. Even the priest could not enter the temple when the cloud filled in. They wanted to enter, but you can't just enter because there is a field that pushes anything that's not supposed to be there away. Then we also have the brightness and the radiance, which is very common. Something we all know: the glory of God is bright and glorious, and it shines. And that is what we all know when it talks about glory. Now there's another twist to it. When you look at the other side, when we talk about glory, it is not always cloudy, smoky, bright, and radiant. Sometimes it appears as darkness. It's not surprising. In Genesis 1 verse 2, it talks about darkness covering the face of the deep. Darkness is highly vilified in the Bible, not in the Bible, but by modern Christian. Like whenever I talk about dark, talking about evil, right? But when you check through scripture, it's not always the case. It's not always business as usual. Darkness can also be a manifestation of God's glory, like it happened on Mount Sinai. The whole mountain was wrapped in darkness, cloud, and gloom. Wow. We should just imagine the word gloom here. Moses himself said he was scared. So this introduces us to some kind of a paradox, a paradoxical nature of the manifestation of God's glory. And these things are natural, they manifest naturally, but then they can also be invisible. Like I always said in the Bible, there is no word like creation and spirit or those two words, they don't exist together. But then we have creation and the invisible. God created the visible and then the invisible. If it is invisible, then we have things like the magnetic force, which is invisible. We have things like electromagnetic radiation, which is also invisible. We also have the invisible like spectrum. That doesn't make it a spirit. So invisibility does not suggest that things are spirit. There are things that we can see, but they are still physical. So there are a lot of paradoxes, things that blows our imagination, things that contradicts our reasoning. And we are always expecting the glory to appear like light. Here it is appearing as well thick dark cloud or thick darkness. And this contradicts our view. Then there is this portion which is very important, which deals with the heaviness and the mass and the weight. When you feel the heaviness, I'm talking about real tangible heaviness, where you feel as if you are carrying metal weight, but there is nothing there, but it is there because spirit carries weight and the power of God carries weight. So it says here, Isaiah 6:3, the whole earth is full of his glory. The word glory means kavod, which implies weighty presence. So when God is present, you can actually feel the heaviness. When God sat on Mount Sinai, the whole mountain was shaking. It's like carrying weight. If you carry a weight that is heavier than you, at the beginning you may bear the weight, but as time goes on, it becomes heavy for you. Your body will begin to tremble. And that is what happened to Mount Sinai when God came on top. The whole mountain was trembling because it was heavy. The power and the energy over it was so heavy, the mountain begins to quake. So those are the manifestation of the glory, the power and all throughout scripture as we have seen it. The New Testament too, we have the glory manifestation and also especially in the transfiguration, the cross and the resurrection. So those are wonderful things, but our main emphasis will be on the fact that the qualities of God's glory across scripture suggest it has heaviness or mass to it, it has tangibility. In other words, it gives tangibility to matter, it gives form, weight, and size to matter. It behaves like a force field. You can feel the energy, like in the case of the temple, the tabernacle in creation. Moses could not enter the tabernacle, the priest and the Levite could not, the priest could not enter the temple because of the field of energy that filled it. And then the brightness, the radiance, the darkness, the cloud, the smoke, the power, the life force, and most importantly, the glory has the ability to transform. It's able to turn one thing into another, like we'll be seeing as we go on. So, those are some of the wonderful display, as Jesus Christ said, the glory I had with you before creation. That means the pre-creation world had glory. So we look at the nature of this glory. It carries weight, like I said. We've seen that already. So this is just a summary. It's a form of energy field. There are vessels to support it. It has brightness, darkness, smoke, transmuting force, consuming fire, light, force, transform. It can transform. It has power. It is functional in nature. Now, this will take us through the pre-creation world. Now, let's go to the details of the pre-creation world to see how the pre-creation world was like. So, this is the world before creation. It wasn't void. It wasn't nothingness. We're going to understand the meaning of the word void here, and the fact that what existed was the fullness of God, Yod He Vahe. He's blazing with glory, consuming fire, unapproachable light. If you're able to travel back in time before everything was made, you won't find nothingness. You're gonna find God, and you're gonna find a field of energy, darkness, and light. You're gonna find things that are contradictory to our senses, paradoxical manifestation of power, energy, sound, vibration, motion. In fact, when you travel back into the pre-creation world, you won't find emptiness. You're gonna find pure energy. You're gonna find pure light. You'll be hearing a lot of sound and vibration. You're gonna feel the heat, the consuming fire, the brightness, the light. All these things are existing in phase. They all exist at the same time. And the frequencies is some kind of noise. Like you hear many waters rushing, primordial waters causing, and they'll be hearing the pulses, the waves of divine energy, like the normal waves. You can actually detect it like pulses, like flow of power. In fact, the pre-creation world before our world was a world that was alive with sound, with rhythm, fields of energy and forces, pains and vibrations and frequencies that are beyond the human senses, something you've never felt before. So a world existed before creation. It wasn't an empty or void. This is the summary of the pre-creation world. There is light, there is darkness. It's like you may not be able to see the being, but you know that there's something there. There is light, there is energy, there is fire, there is pure divine energy, there is vibration. You can feel the heaviness. There is heaviness. You know that world, everything is heavy. I think even if we go into the pre-creation world, you might actually burn. You burn because of the pure energy that exists, and your sound may not be able to comprehend the beauty of this vibration, the mighty rushing waters, the sound, the rhythm, beautiful fields of energies. That would have been a beautiful universe to be in, a perfection of reality of life. So, like we've seen already, how where God dwells in these realms, a realm of light, unapproachable light. Light is not considered as matter, but this is a kind of light that it has something like a field. You can't enter in. You know you want to enter, but there's a force. That's a strange kind of light. A light that can push a person. No sound can push a person, but light here you can do the same. So it's a field of energy. Now let's go on to re-exploring the primordial universe. In this part, we're going to look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 to 2, because it is the most overlooked. I've always wanted to learn from it, but then there are a lot that I have to learn from by myself. And over there, we're going to explore the four elements. Because it forms the foundation of creation: the spirit, that is wind; air, that is earth, that is the land masses; we have the waters; and then we have this strange energy field called darkness. You want to see what it is. So, into the primordial universe, Genesis 1 verse 1 verse 1 to 2, it serves as a foundation. And as it stated in the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. Now we are always I initially thought that this is talking about the heaven, the very heaven that God was, but no, this is talking about the sky. In other words, in the beginning, God created the sky and the earth. The earth not as a planet, as we must suggest, as we're about to see. It refers to the supercontinents, the solid part of this world, not planet as in a modern sense. The word planet means a rover, something that is moving, but the biblical universe suggests otherwise, that the earth is not a rover. It is actually the landmass, the solid part, the part where we live on, the continents. So that is what Genesis was saying. And in the verse 2, that is where we see some of the most interesting verses, very controversial, but not confusing, as we're about to be demonstrating. It goes on to say, and the earth was formless and void. So we have formlessness and voidness, and then it said with darkness. And then speak about the spirit. The spirit means wind. So this is the one who was writing the book. He wasn't there. I don't know how he got it. Maybe by revelation. But maybe Adam taught them. God taught Adam. Adam knew all things. He was able to give names to animals. So Adam knew it. He taught his children, and his children taught his children, and then on and on and on. And Moses and the priests got to know it. There's high probability this was written when Israel became a nation. Not when we're traveling in the wilderness. In the wilderness, God made Moses to travel to write about the journeys. He was not made to write about Genesis. So Genesis was written when Israel became a nation and they became a state. Now, once there is peace, you can now write history. You cannot commit yourself to art. And with art, you explore history. So here, this is what the observer was writing. They saw a world that is formless, void, not the world, earth. Okay, the world means the whole thing. Earth means a part of it, part of the world. So they also saw darkness, and they saw the Spirit of God, which is the wind, moving, shining the waters. We're going to see why. And these elements, we're not told how they came into being. We're just told that they are there already. and we assume Genesis chapter 1 verse 3 marks the beginning of creation. No, we need to know how the darkness came into being. We need to know how the waters were created. And Isaiah 45:7 proves it that darkness was actually created. So it's not an absence of something, it was a deliberate act of creation. So creation did not come out of nothing, as you've seen. It came out of the power of God, the wisdom. The word wisdom means intelligence. And if you study just a single cell, you can see how intricate and complex it is. It suggests this thing was a mind of intelligence that produced it. It did not just come by accident. And by the way, the word in Aramaic is memra, that is logos in Greek, so or divine in Hebrew, but then it is a being, as John said, the word became flesh. So let's look at how the first elements of creation were made in Genesis chapter 1 verse 2, because there are 4 elements there we need to know. Here they are: spirit, like I said earlier; earth, that referring to the land mass, not the planet, not the whole world. It is the earth. The word earth means land mass. And then waters, and then darkness. So we go on to look at them. So this is a creation of the primordial elements. In Genesis 1 verse 2, it said the Spirit of God moved over the face of the earth. So that's the first thing we need to know throughout the scripture. This is the first part where we introduce to the Spirit of God. And we know what the Spirit of God does. When it comes upon a person, he rushes on a person, energizes the person, causes the person to do things that are naturally what we may call superhuman. So here, how did the observer see the Spirit? Did he seem like a being with hands and legs? No, he saw the entity as well, a mighty wind. The writer observed. What he observed is what he wrote, and he wrote, see the wind shining over the waters. In Numbers 11 verse 17, we see when the people wanted meat, something happened. In a spirit went out of God and brought quills. But then there's something more. Also, I'll take the Spirit upon you and put it upon them, speaking to Moses. So, how was the movement of the waters like? It moved almost like what I've shown you here. You see the way it is? Like it moved in a cyclical way. It was churning like a vortex, like a hurricane. That's how it moved. And it's throughout scripture we see the Spirit, we have been told, adorn the heavens. So we have first the Spirit, which is a force of creation, and then we go on to the second part, which is the waters proceeding from the breath of God. So the creative breath produced the waters. It said, by the word of the Lord, the heavens were made. So the heavens were made by the word of the Lord. And then by the breath of his mouth, all the hosts thereof. So we see the two things together, the word and the breath. And he talked about the deep waters, that's the home, it symbolized the chaotic abyss. In Genesis, we are introduced into the great abyss, the deep, the fountain, the fountain of the deep, or the great abyss, where we talk about the waters, which in Hebrew, which in ancient Mesopotamia call it the abuso. It's like a deep abyss, the sea, a deep chasm filled with water. So we have the Spirit, which is gaseous, and out of the Spirit came the great waters. And the Spirit flows like water anyway. And then something began to happen, something strange. So the waters now emerges like a whirlpool, like a vortex. It's like a hurricane. And so, remember, it was first the wind, followed by the waters, and then out of the waters came what is impossible. Two elements that do not agree. One quenches the other. You know, water and fire, they don't agree, but the opposite occurred. In Revelation, we are told that from the throne of God proceeds water, and the scripture states that it forms a crystal water coming out of the throne, isn't it? Now, check what Daniel also said. From the same throne, he said, a fiery flame, okay, streams of fire flew from the throne. So, from the same throne, two irreconcilable things began to flow out of water and fire. We know water quenches fire. These two, they are always in conflict. But then from the same throne, the impossible becomes possible. There is fire coming out of the throne. There is also great amount of waters proceeding out of the throne. And that is how we know the creation of the world would have been possible, as we will see in the later verses, that One, there's a wind. Two, we have water. Three, there's fire flowing in the waters. And then what happened? He said here, out of it come for the great liquid mass of fire which issues forth. So, we see it in John, river of fire coming from the throne. And in Daniel, we also see fire coming out of the throne. So, three elements have now been seen here. We have the wind, we have the waters, and then we have the fiery mass of liquid flowing. One is producing the other. The wind produces the water produces the fire. What a case of this is a paradox. I mean, water producing fire is contradictory. It is an impossibility, but that's what is happening. Now, what happened when this liquid fire remains continuously under the water because it never ceased? The spirit kept on producing the waters, and the waters kept on producing the fiery liquid mass. And remember, they are moving in the vortex, in like a hurricane. They are going round, round, round. So what happens? What happens is a semi-solid mass forms beneath the earth. And then eventually what goes on is a super humongous fiery mass actually gathers under the primordial waters. And that is what would have actually happened, as in Psalm 136 verses 2 states, to him who spreads out the earth over there. Wow, we're going to see in the other verses that it was the other way around. The earth was over the waters, but now God turned it the other way again. The earth is now upon the waters. So, he said the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. So the earth was already there. That's the land mass. It was already there, as we are now seeing. As the liquid will continue to flow under the waters, it begins to turn semi-solid, and as it goes on to become semi-solid, eventually constant cooling will solidify it eventually. So we see here, this is a summary of Genesis 1 verse 2. We have the Spirit, which is the breath of God, the mighty initiator, and then out of it come forth the great waters. And how would that creation be? The creation wouldn't have been as quiet as it would have been presented. The spirit creates wind, it creates sound, it creates vibration, there's resonance across the universe. As the waters rushes, it produces a lot of sound, a lot of vibration, a lot of noise. And as the waters proceed from the breath of God, what happens is that it creates something like a whirlpool. The waters of the world, they flow in a particular direction. They are not flowing chaotically. They are still keeping on the direction of flow which they have maintained since creation. And this also creates sound. If you were to exist in the days of creation, you will hear the massive noise and the vibration. Creation wasn't so quiet and calm like we would have imagined it. Remember, Jeremiah said God stretched out his hand and the spirit started moving in the vortex, and then out of the spirit came fire. Out of the spirit came waters, and out of the waters came fire, and then the fire, which was liquid, it began to solidify, and then God begins to cool it, and he covered it with darkness. And before I talk about it, we need to understand that I've already explained that liquid fire with waters proceeds out of the throne of God, and this fire will produce heat. So how do you contain the heat? You have to subject it under fire. It's almost like underwater lava eruption. It creates a whole lot of noise. Now this liquefied fiery blob, it forms something humongous. It becomes so huge because humans will need solid mass to walk on. We're gonna need land to live on. And how do you get a land? How do you get something that is hot to cool? You put it underwater, you submerge it. So we see the same process happening. The wind is still blowing to dissipate the heat because of the fiery liquid, and the water is there to cool it. And as it cools, it begins to turn from liquid to semi-liquid, and from semi-liquid to fiery liquid to semi-solid, semi-solid to solid. It's a chain of event, and all this things happen in one day. And we know a day is 24 hours, and we know according to the Hebrew setting, a day is between sunset and sunset. And so, day one, when God created everything, it's not like everything came in a second. I mean, within that period, that time frame between sunset and sunset, a lot of events continue to happen. That's all these things began to happen. And as evidence to prove that yes, the earth was born out of fire, submerged underwater for it to cool, Peter 3 verse 5 speaks about the fact that the earth was standing out of water, and then in other words, the earth was submerged before it appeared, part of it appeared. And so part of the earth appeared above the water. Hence, as an observer, you can see the earth outside the waters, but part of it is still submerged. So what happened? Why is the fiery liquid turning semi-solid, and why is it solidifying? How do you actually solidify it? To solidify, there has to be a cooling and a solidification mechanism. And how do you ensure that? To ensure that there is cooling and solidification, it must be put underwater. So it is very clear that the earth formed beneath the great waters, as we've seen even in the account of Peter, how God created the earth underwater. So the semi-solid blob submerged underwater eventually underwent through the process of cooling and solidification, because the entire mass was under the great waters. Due to the submergence, it led to some form of a uniform cooling and solidification, which is actually confirmed in Genesis 1 verse 2, which says that the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the. We all know darkness, the space is a vacuum, and it's able to absorb a whole lot of radiation. And space is very cold. It's very cold because of this dark medium. Actually, because there's no material matter to radiate the energy. It explains why the massive heat, which was actually being cooled by the great water and dissipated by the great wind, had override darkness, so that the darkness can absorb this excessive heat. All these things are physical process done by an invisible God, and this extreme temperature needs cooling, because when we talk about power, we are actually talking about energy. Something in Psalm 26 verse 11 to 12, very interesting. So the pillars of the earthquake, it shakes, aghast at his rebuke. Then he said, by his power, what does it do? He chants the sea. How do you chant the sea? You blow wind so that the wind will stir the sea to actually dissipate excessive heat. It also explains why the ocean is constantly cool, relatively. And then we have seen what comes out of the throne, that's fire liquid. And all these things happened because God formed the earth so that it would be what? Inhabited. Inhabited by who? By himself, in the form of human beings. So we are the manifestation of God on earth. It is God living through us. We are supposed to allow God to live through us to make our existence here meaningful. So this mechanism of creation is very important, as Peter actually pointed it out, the fact that the earth was standing out of the waters and in waters, and the cooling and solidification effect of the great liquid mass of fire by these waters ensured its solidification. Then it goes on to say the earth, which is a landmass. Don't think about the earth in terms of a planet. You have to think about it in terms of land, the continent, the crust, the mantle. Okay, so remember, all these things are still under the earth. The earth hasn't appeared yet. It is still submerged under the great waters so that it can cool. From the observer point of view, you could see what do you call it, a fiery red mass, like amber, at the bottom of the great waters, and there is no light there. The only source of light would have been the glory, and the only source of light under the waters would have been the glowing semi-liquid or solidified earth mass. And then the heat will cause the waters to boil, to generate a lot of steam. And to avoid the steam from concentrating in one part of the universe, the spirit was always moving, churning it, hovering, moving over it, going round like the waters, to dissipate the heat, to speed up the process of cooling. And also to absorb this excess heat from the steam, God placed darkness over it. Darkness is not the absence of light. It is some kind of a material matter that helps in stabilizing the temperature of the universe. So the submerged solid mass in the great waters heated up the waters to extremely high temperature, and to get it cooled, you need other forces to ensure that the superheated water it doesn't concentrate in one part of the universe. So we have superheated waters producing superheated steam and vapor, and it fills the cosmic void. And to ensure that it doesn't concentrate in one place, the spirit stirs it up. The water itself is boiling, becoming boiling hot. It's almost like cooking something. I mean, it's cooking life. It's not surprising that's how the earth is. Darkness covers the earth, which is a tangible material mass, which acts as like a stabilizer for the fairy energy mass, preventing uncontrolled release of energy into the cosmic void. And remember, there was a darkness that covered Egypt, and that darkness, the scripture said, it is a darkness that can be felt. No, not the darkness we experience in our places, rooms. This is something else. It's something like a veil, like a material mass. It absorbs energy. It explains why space is always cold. Then what happens next? We constantly see the spirit stirring up the waters, keeps on stirring to ensure that the energy is not concentrated in one part, to ensure balanced energy distribution. This prevents chaos, and it is some kind of a divine engineering act, keeping order amidst pyramidal turbulence. And what happens next? So, the order of creation is actually summarized that in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 to 2, it wasn't just something we have to be picky about, something we can skip. This is something very important to know, that darkness is not evil, as we may mostly assume. Darkness is something tangible, it's not the absence of light, it's a material mass, it's a stabilizer, it stabilizes the universe. It explains why space is black, not because of there is no matter there. The sun is in space, yes, it's still black because it's a material matter. It is something that stabilizes the universe. And the spirit stirs up the waters into a vortex like a hurricane, like I said earlier, and to ensure balanced distribution. So our popular notion is that God created the earth, and we imagine the earth like this is like the earth that we see. That is what God created. No, God did not create the earth like we see it. It was born. It went through a process. It went through a fiery process before it became what it is. It isn't some form of something that existed. Most of the time, it's not what the Bible is saying, which is wrong. It is our imagination, our perception, our reasoning that is wrong. So I believe this thing here at this stage, at least you have some fair idea about how the four elements were made, about Genesis 1 and verse 2. Now that's not the end. This is the end of part 1. Now in the second part, we are going to explore something much more awesome, something much more deeper. I'll recommend that you make sure you like and subscribe. And there are other videos or presentations that I've made. The Shadim, the Great Flood of Noah, the Rise of the Nephilim. I've done a whole lot of things from the Book of Revelation also. Go to my channel, make sure you like it. Thank you very much. God bless you.